Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement is a documentary you can't afford to miss.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Yeah. G'day guys, this is Holy Critics signing in and welcome back to the channel. Now, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time now, you'll know that I don't tend to shy away from the more controversial topics. I've exposed Bill Gates. I've questioned Anthony Fauci. Heck, I've even condemned the royal family. But, you know, there's been a failing on my behalf, and that's been my inability to connect the dots. For you, I'm just going to come out and say that I watch Alex Jones. I watch him, find him extremely entertaining. And yes, he's a clown. Maybe he does a disservice to the conspiracy movement, but every now and again, he nails it. I came across a documentary he made quite a number of years ago, I think 2007, Endgame. And recently he's been sort of promoting it. And I thought, oh gosh, you know, it's a bit old, isn't it? I mean, 2007, I mean, that can't possibly be predictive of what's happening in the post-pandemic world. But I happened to check it out last night. By God, I swear, everything in that documentary has come true. We are living in a nightmare situation. I can't see things going back to the way they were before all this furore began. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you an excerpt from the full 2-hour documentary, which I have linked in the comments below so that you can see the full thing for yourself and, of course, do your own research on the topics it discusses. And you might think I'm a kook for listening to someone like Alex Jones, but it's going to be very hard for you to refute some of the things I'm going to talk about. So, without further ado, let's get stuck into it.
The overlords of scientific dictatorship are ruthlessly prosecuting a war on our most defenseless. In December of 1974, the U.S. government made third world population reduction a central national security issue. The operation plan, titled National Security Study Memorandum 200, was simply a regurgitation of the British Commission on Population created by King George VI of England in 1944, which openly stated that populous third world nations posed a threat to the international elite's monopoly of global power.
So, you had King George the Sixth, I think they said there. Well, you know, his royal family, his daughter was the current Queen, Elizabeth. The royal family, they wouldn't possibly be involved in some nefarious New World Order scheme, would they? I mean, they're so loving, they're so liberal. Well, let's see a quote of from the recently passed Prince Philip, husband to Queen Elizabeth. And I quote, "In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus to contribute something to solving overpopulation." Yes, the world mourned the recent passing of Prince Philip. Tragic, you know, he was a really nice guy, you know, he just wanted to help your family. That's what he thinks about you. Really nice guy, isn't he? You should really mourn his passing. Really philanthropic of him. Listen to this interview he did.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because if where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Can't you guess?
Well, it could be on a spectrum from mass sterilisation to you know, greater availability of contraception. I don't know what your views are as to what can be done about it.
Well, I think it might be described as voluntary family limitation.
Voluntary family limitation. But he'd like to return as a deadly virus to wipe you out. But he's going to be real mild here and say, well, we're not going to sterilize people. No, that's far too aggressive. No, we're going to go the conservative approach and make people feel guilty and horrible and, burdensome on the planet. That they'll volunteer to stop reproducing. Right.
The Kissinger-authored U.S. plan targeted 13 key countries where massive population reduction was called for. Kissinger recommended that IMF and World Bank loans be given on condition that nations initiate aggressive population control programs, such as sterilization. Kissinger also recommended that food be used as a weapon, and that instigating wars was also a helpful tool in reducing population.
So using food, well, that makes sense. Cut the food off, the people die. Pretty harsh, isn't it? But it's actually happening due to COVID-19. The following article is from the United Nations, the globalist body in the world. COVID-related hunger could kill more people than the virus. After months of lockdown, countries around the world are starting to reopen, and yet still the death toll from COVID-19 keeps rising. By the end of June, a little over 500,000 people have succumbed to the disease. But that could be a drop in the ocean compared to the humanitarian fallout. Before COVID hit the scene, we'd already been saying that 2020 was going to be the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. It's estimated that 9 million people die a year of hunger, more than the death toll of AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. But the pandemic could make the situation even worse, as the breakdown of supply chains has left the World Food Programme and other United Nations agencies struggling. The commercial airline industry has all been shut down, making it hard to get supplies and experts out to where they are needed. And as the health crisis becomes an economic one, Beasley worries that funding might dry up, causing starvation on an enormous scale. This hunger pandemic will rip through the hearts of many nations.
In 1972, the Nixon White House also implemented a eugenics policy, which was directed by George Herbert Walker Bush, then United States Ambassador to the United Nations. Bush advised China on the formulation of their one-child policy and directed the federal government to forcibly sterilize more than 40% of Native American women on reservations. The Bilderberg-dominated Club of Rome advocated environmentalism as the best front to implement population reduction.
Climate change.
Western populations would accept serfdom if it was packaged as saving the earth.
Have you been hearing things like Build Back Better? You'll own nothing and you'll have nothing and you'll be happy? Been hearing all those sort of quotes? For the economic recovery from COVID-19 to be durable and resilient, a return to business as usual and environmentally destructive investment patterns and activities must be avoided. Do you see the convergence happening here? Use one crisis to solve another. Unchecked, global environmental emergencies such as climate change and biodiversity loss could cause social and economic damages far larger than those caused by COVID-19. This means doing more than getting economies and livelihoods quickly back on their feet. Can't have that, can we? We've got to change the whole system. Recovery policies also need to trigger investment and behavioural changes. What kind of behavioural changes? That will likely reduce future shocks and increase society's resilience to them when they do occur. COVID-19 has led to a reduction in our personal carbon footprints. Wow! That's fantastic, isn't it? There's been a 17% reduction in our carbon footprint between February 2019 and October 2020. The new data shows that between 2019 and 2020, there has been a near doubling of the number of people who are on 100% renewable energy tariffs, with an increase from 12% to 21%. With travel being the largest contributor to the average carbon footprint, the COVID-19 pandemic has played a large part in reducing this, mainly because of decreased flights. The researchers have highlighted that switching to cycling, public transport, and electric cars can help further to reduce an individual's carbon footprint as life returns to normal. So it's like a glove in a hand. The lockdowns has caused people to stay in their homes, reduce their carbon footprint. Of course, it's destroyed the economy, but that's a side issue. There won't be too many humans in the future anyway to have to pay out welfare to. And even Joe Biden, the current president of the United States, what does he do in the pandemic? Well, he ups their contribution. Boom. He announces the US will aim to cut carbon emissions by as much as 52% by 2030. This has all been pre-planned, pre-scripted from decades, if not more than half a century ago. It's already been decided. And they're using this crisis as their opportunity to take advantage of the plan that was always in place.
Industrialization of Africa, Asia, and Latin America could be blocked. Citizens would more willingly give up their national sovereignty if it were sold as a way to help the planet. The think tank also concocted the peak oil fraud as a way to create artificial scarcity. And the Club of Rome has been aggressively pushing a global carbon tax as a way to fund their planetary government.
In the draft copy of the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment, it states very clearly that we must reduce the human population from its current level of about 6 billion people down to about 1 billion people.
In the 1970s, South Africa developed race-specific bioweapons to target blacks and Asians, and then subsequently sold the technology to Israel in the mid-1980s. In September of 2000, the Project for a New American Century published a document in which Dick Cheney described race-specific bioweapons as politically useful tools.
And somebody mentioned, well, why would they want to reduce the human population when that means less money for them? Most people have no idea. They're not after money. They have all the money they need. They're after power. That's their aphrodisiac.
The overlords of the New World Order are now aggressively pushing for a worldwide one-child policy.
Yay, Bill Gates. What a hero.
The Chinese one-child policy was phased in gradually. In the 60s, when it began, you only had to pay a tax penalty. Only later did they imprison you if you had more than one child. Now the exact same proposals to penalize couples who have more than one child are being made in the United States, England, and Europe.
In the push to reduce global warming, children, according to some, are the new culprits. A think tank in the UK says too many kids are what's making the planet worse, saying large families, anything over 2 children really, should be frowned upon as an environmental no-no, akin to not reusing your plastic bags, driving one of those big gas-guzzling cars.
Oh, here we go. You're having too many children. And what happened to the world population during the pandemic? What were the birth rates, you might ask? Okay, so here's an article from the Hill. It was hypothesized that as the country went into lockdown, the United States, last year amid the coronavirus pandemic, the lack of things to do and places to go would lead to an increase in conceptions and births. Makes sense, right? However, the exact opposite occurred. The COVID-19 baby boom appears to be a baby bust. The analysis compiled the birth data for residents from 24 states, as well as the data from California, the most populous state in the country, which included data from all births, residents, and visitors. While births across the United States had been dropping by less than 1% through the past decade, the analysis concluded that births for 2020 had fallen 4.3% from 2019. Since the majority of births in 2020 were babies conceived in 2019 prior to the coronavirus pandemic and lockdowns, the AP acknowledges the data does at least in part reflect what was already a downward trend. Of course, we've been told for years that we're overpopulated. It's gone off a cliff now. However, data for births in December 2020 as well as January and February 2021 would have coincided with conception during the lockdown, showing a decreasing birth rate of 6.5%, 9.3%, and 10%. It's snowballing. When there's a crisis, I don't think people are thinking about reproduction. Why climate change is driving some to skip having kids. A new study finds that overconsumption, overpopulation, and uncertainty about the future are among the top concerns of those who say climate change is affecting their reproductive decision-making. Who in their right mind would want to bring children into this world? We don't know what's coming tomorrow. All we know is we're going to be ladening them with our burden, right? All this debt that we've trillions of stimulus will have to be paid back by our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, right? So why would you want to bring a child into this horrible, hellish, wretched world?
Taking long trips overseas. The UK, in fact, has negative growth. I think Canada does too. That still, families in our rich countries shouldn't have more than 2 kids.
In 1998, Ted Turner pledged to give more than $1 billion to the United Nations to be spent in the implementation of population reduction policies planet-wide. In 1999, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave $2.2 billion.
You might want to rename that just the Bill Gates Foundation. They just divorced today. It's probably all over the headlines, you know that anyway.
To Planned Parenthood, the United Nations Population Fund, and other population reduction groups. By 2007, the Gates had given more than $30 billion, almost exclusively to population control groups. The controlled corporate press cynically reported that the Gates were giving the money to help third world children. Bill and Melinda Gates were dethroned as the world's most generous philanthropists when their friend and fellow population reduction enthusiast, Warren Buffett, gave $37 billion to fund an army of population control groups.
And I actually think the world will be much better when there's only 10 or 20% of us left. Dr. Eric Pianka.
Prominent University of Texas biologist Dr. Eric Pianka, while receiving an award from the Texas Academy of Science, said that the worldwide AIDS pandemic was, quote, no good, it's too slow, and went on to laud the virtues of Ebola because it would kill 90% of the world population quickly. When his statements erupted into a national controversy, his graduate students defended him, stating that Pianka was too conservative and that all humans should be killed.
China was able to turn the corner and become the leading world superpower because they have a police state and they are able to force people to stop reproducing.
And there you have it, guys. I just opened Pandora's box for you. Maybe some of what you just heard you already knew about. Some of it may be music to your ears. Some of you might be denying what I've just revealed to you. But either way, it's happening. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you found it somewhat enlightening. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm more than happy to read your thoughts in the comment section below. All I can say is my gut instinct is that Bill Gates and his cohort aren't acting in the best interests of mankind. And my gut is never wrong. So take that for what you will. This is Holy Critic, signing out.